Good morning, North Road. Let's proclaim our God's goodness this morning. Because He saved us, because He loves us. This morning He's worthy of our worship. Let's give Him that, let's sing, come on. Remember those walls that we called sin and shame. They were like prisons that we couldn't escape. He came and He died and He rose. Those walls are rubble now. Remember those giants we called death and grave. They were like mountains that stood in our way. But He came and He died and He rose. Those giants are dead now. This is our God. Yeah, this is our God. This is who He is. He loves us. This is our God. This is what He does. He saved us. He bore the cross, beat the grave. He let heaven and earth proclaim. This is our God, King Jesus. Remember that fear that took our breath away. Faith so weak that we could barely pray. But He heard every word, every whisper. In the wilderness, tell the story of His faithfulness. Never once did He fail, and He never will. No, this is our God. This is our God. This is what He is. He loves us. This is our God. This is what He does. He saves us. He bore the cross. He beat the grave. Let heaven and earth proclaim. This is our God, King Jesus. This is what He does. Who pulled me out of that pit? He did. He did. Who paid for all of our sin? Nobody but Jesus. Who pulled me out of that pit? He did. He did. Who paid for all of our sin? Nobody but Jesus. Who rescued me from the grave? Yahweh, Yahweh. Who gets the glory and praise? Nobody but Jesus. Who rescued me from that grave? Yahweh, Yahweh. Who gets the glory and praise? Nobody but Him. This is our God. This is who He is. He loves us. give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord.
Give him your breath and worship now.
It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. Give life, you are love, bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only.
This morning we join with the angels, we join with creation in shouting the praise of its God, of its creator. Let's do that. Let's join with them. Let's join together. Let's shout his praise.
All the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry. These bones will sing. Great are you, Lord.
Yes, you are God.
All the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry. These bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. All the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry. These bones
Come on, shout praise.
are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you
We sing, great are you, Lord. Yes, it's your breath in our lungs. We pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs. So we pour out our praise to you only. You can be seated.
We're going to continue worshiping this morning and enter into a time of offering. And as we do that, I know we've got a lot of people still trying to find seats. And so if you're able to, if there is space in between you, if you guys can kind of scoot together. Listen, if they're wearing a Chiefs jersey, it's okay. Pray for them as you scoot next to them. I'm kidding. I'm not an Eagles fan either. Don't boo me. I'm not an Eagles fan either. Go football. But no, really, if you guys can scoot in a little bit, I know we've got a lot of people looking. There, when you're standing up during worship, it looks like there's no seats, but there are a lot of seats. I know we've got some people seating them, so thank you guys for moving. We've got several up front. We call it the spit zone. Several up front if you want to come sit up here, and if not, we've got some seats in the back as well. Thank you guys for being patient and gracious with us. We're running out of space, we understand, but thank you guys for still showing up. But this morning, as we enter into this time of offering, I want to remind you, if you came today prepared to give in person, we want to give you that opportunity, and so there are some buckets set up at the back of the room, and so you can drop that on your way out. If you're a guest with us today, welcome. We're excited that you guys are here. We're so thankful that you would choose to worship with us on a Sunday morning. We are doing everything we can to fix this space issue. It is a great problem to have, and we are praising God for it. But if you are a guest with us, the one thing we'd ask of you during this time is in the seat back in front of you. If you're sitting out in the Commons, you may have to come in here and grab one. But in the seat back in front of you, there's what we call a Connect card. We would love for you just to fill that out at some point this morning, drop it off in the buckets, or take it to our Connect corner out in the Commons. We would love the opportunity just to get connected with you and know that you are here and answer any questions you might have about this place. Well, as we get ready to continue worshiping, would you guys pray with me? Father, we're just so thankful for an opportunity to sit in your presence. And God, I know that we come into this place just with different backgrounds, different stories, different weeks. Some of us had great weeks. Some of us had horrible weeks. But God, I pray in this moment you would give us the ability through you to just lay it at your feet, to kind of sit humbly before you, knowing that you are a refuge in times of trouble. That God, you would meet us where we're at. If we need pulling out of the pit, God, you would do just that. And God, no matter the circumstances of us finding ourselves in this room, we know that we're here for a purpose. And God, you are unchanging, and we will rest in that fact. God, this morning, we have no agenda. We have no itinerary other than you being worshiped and praised because you're simply worthy of it. So God, collectively as one body, I pray that we would do that. I pray that we would worship you in the way that we give, in the way we love, in the way we serve, in the way we sing, in the way we hear and respond to your word. God, there's transformational power in your word, and I pray that we would understand that. God, this morning, help us to look less like us and more like you. We just want to worship you because you're worthy of it, God. We pray this in your name. Amen.
As kids, do you remember playing the game, Where's Waldo? You know, the game where Waldo is the face in the crowd, and it is your job to try and spot his famous striped hat and shirt. It seemed like the artists for those pictures were masters at hiding Waldo so strategically that he was impossible to find. You know, church for a lot of us can be just like that. We come to church and we're like a master artist trying to blend in so that nobody notices. We come and we go out, then we rinse and repeat the next week. But God didn't create you to sit on the sidelines or to just be another face in the crowd. Instead, he's calling us to stand out from the tapestry and to make our mark. Church on Sunday morning can feel so big at times, like it's almost swallowing us. But did you know that in our Christian walks, it's not the size that bothers us, but it's the connections? In other words, we have to figure out our space in the bigger C church. We have to identify a small group of people to do life with. We have to find a small place to serve in God's bigger picture. And when we do that, we start growing smaller.
Well, good morning. How you doing? I'm glad you're here, man. I'm sorry you have to sit out there in the hallway. I know there's some more seats if you guys want to come in and you're cool with it. For the rest of us, here's what I would say. If you are a person that's been coming to North Road for a while, and you would use it as your mission opportunity to go to our fourth service, that would really make things a lot easier here because we're having to look at maybe going to a fifth service. And so if you could help us out, that would really, really kind of help us out and get us down the road. I have been looking forward to this sermon for like weeks now. And I'll tell you why, because I have a worry in my heart that I know worry is not of God, but it's still a worry, so I'm just going to be real and tell you that I'm worried. And here's my worry. I know whenever somebody comes to a church and they make it their new home, which we've had a lot of people do that lately, usually that person will give that church about 6 to 7 weeks where they try out that church, and if they don't find connection, they're on looking for the next one. And that just breaks my heart because I don't want to see that happen, and I get it. And the reason I get it is I've been that guy. I've been that guy that went to a church and didn't have connection and didn't want to be there anymore. I was a youth pastor for 20 years before I started this church 10 years ago. And one of the last churches I was a youth pastor at was a church in Dallas, Texas called Prestonwood. Here's a picture of it. That's the auditorium. Here's the candlelight service that we were in. On a Sunday morning, there would be about 9,000 people there. And you have to understand, student ministry was on one side of the church, children's ministry was on the other side of the church. It took 10 minutes to walk from one to the other. And my wife and I would go teach 2 hours of Sunday school for students. And then she would take the kids to children's the hour before, and then she would go drink a coffee in the commons while she would wait for the kids to get done, and me, because she didn't want to go a small group by herself. And then we would meet right up here in the corner. There was some double doors right there, because how are you going to come in here and find your wife in the middle of 9,000 people? So I would walk up to this door on the other side of the church, and right in there, I'd walk in and she'd be sitting right there. We did that for 2 years. That's how long I was at that church. And the reason I was there for 2 years is because I would wave at the people that sat in our area, because it was the same people every week. You know that. You come to church and you find your little spot and you go back to your little spot every week. And I'd go to my spot and they'd go to their spot and we'd be like, hey, how you doing? I had no idea who they were. I was in such a hurry to try to get my job done, and my wife was in such a hurry to grab the kids and make sure she met me, because she didn't want to sit alone in the middle of thousands of people. It was our Where's Waldo experience. I mean, we're sitting there, and we got a year in, and I'm like, we're strangers in the middle of thousands. We don't know people. I know the students, and I know some of the student workers that I work with. Well, I know all of the student workers I work with. But outside of that, we didn't have a small group of people. So a year in, we were starved for connection. You go, well, I thought you said you only last 6 weeks. Well, you only last 6 weeks if you're not paid. If you're paid, you last a little bit longer. So about a year in, I just was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I remember my wife and I having that first conversation. And then about a year and a half in, I'm looking for another place to go work. And we ended up moving to Orlando, Florida to take another job in another church because we lacked connection. Now here's what I would say. The size of this is not why we didn't enjoy that church. Dude, there were times when you'd walk into that church, like on a candlelight service like this, and everybody'd be singing like 10,000 people at one time, and it was like electric, right? You were like, wow, this is such a cool experience to watch so many people of God's people just get to worship at the same time. Resources there, man, my kids had the greatest children's experience, the greatest student experience. I mean, there were so many things. It wasn't the size of the church that was the problem. It was the lack of connection that Matt Bartig had at that church. So maybe you've been coming for a few weeks and you're like, is this place for me? I mean, sometimes I have to sit out in the hallway and it's just so crowded. And, I sit next to this guy and he kind of, rolls into my chair and I don't like that. And we all have reasons, right? Can I just for a second tell you, connection changes that. If you are not connected with a group of people who know your life, you need to be. If you're not connected with a group of people who care whether or not you're sick or you're in the hospital, your marriage is going rough, or your job just got lost, if you don't have people like that, why would you want to be there in the first place? You go, well, I like the message. Okay, you like the message for about 6 weeks. Well, the worship's for about 6 weeks. And then if we don't connect, we're in trouble. You'll be like me, who had to be there. And so my question is this as we start. For those of you that are new, I just got a question for you. How connected are you here? Are you just coming in, hearing the music and the message, and you're like, oh, this is refreshing. I like this. I like being here. Can I just tell you and encourage you? That's not enough. It's not going to sustain you long term. You're not going to remain here long term if you don't find a long-term group of people to connect with. And so as we look at the message today, we're going to look at what this means for all of us. And we're going to talk about how we need to connect, and then I'm going to give you some opportunities too. If you got your Bibles, I want you to do me a favor and go to the book of Hebrews, Hebrews chapter 10. And as we look at the book of Hebrews, here's what you're going to find. Is you're going to find Paul is talking to a group of people who watched Jesus crucified, who watched him raised from the dead, and Paul started a church. Now you got to remember, Peter stood up in front of everybody and thousands of people came to know Jesus in one day, right? And so all of a sudden people are like, wow, this thing is changing quick. Paul kind of sees them kind of wanting to go back to their old way of life or back to the church that they grew up in. And he's like, man, that is not the church that preaches Jesus. You don't need to go that way. And so he started writing this book of Hebrews that just reminds them, first of all, here's who Christ is. And then here's what he says is so important for you. And if Hebrews chapter 10, verse 23, here's what he says. Let us, I want you to rest on that word us. We're going to live there a lot today. Let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess. Can I ask you a question? You ever swerved in and out of church? You know, man, it's been a while since I've been in church. I better go back. So you swerve in, and then life kind of happens, and you kind of swerve out. And then, you know what? Our kids really need to be in church, so you swerve back in. Do you know why you do that? Because there's nothing stopping you from swerving. Paul says, let us together as one body hold unswervingly. Do you know what that looks like? That means when you're swerving, there should be somebody in your life that's looking at you and going, hey bro, you're looking a little off kilter. I notice you're not here as much. Man, it looks like your walk or your marriage is not going very good. I noticed you guys were fighting in the hallway. Everything okay? How can I be praying for you? And it's those kind of things that take a swerving person and put them back on the straight. But if you don't have that, and every Sunday you come in and it's 3 songs in a sermon and you get in your car and you rinse, wash, repeat, you are not creating connection that is going to keep you long-term from swerving away from God once again. So Paul writes to the people of Hebrews and he says, let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess. For he who promised us is faithful. And here's how we're going to do it. Let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds. Look at this. May we sit around and have a lot of conversations about how we can make people feel connected. You ever come to North Road and go, good grief, there's something all the time. There's kids ministry and student ministry, and there's men's ministry, there's women's ministry, and there's Shine ministry for kids with special needs, and there's ministries for moms, and there's ministry for this, and it just seems like there's so many things going on here. Sometimes it's too much. Can I tell you a secret? You should not be going to all of it. If you are going to all of it, take a breath. Stop it, okay? You don't have to go to everything. But here's what I think you need to realize. That is where we sat down and we said, okay, if we're going to spur our church to find people to do life with, then everybody walks in a different way of life. So we have to make opportunities where everybody has a place to connect. That's exactly what Paul said. Hey, let's sit down and let's consider how as a group, as a body, we may spur one another on toward good deeds. Because look at this, you ready? We don't get closer to God living in a silo by ourselves. We get closer to God when we rub elbows with people who are trying to get after the same God that we are. God talked about this. He talked about it through Paul again in the book of Corinthians. He talked about how important it is we're a body. Look at this. Corinthians chapter 12, I said Hebrews chapter 10, that's what threw off. Here's what it says, for the body does not consist of one member, but many. In other words, when you look around, God specifically put you in this room with these people because they are a part of your body of Christ. They are here to help you. You may go, well, I don't even know that person. Yeah, I know. That's why we lack connection, and that's why it gets so serious that we have to find it, because those people are in this room to be a body part that helps us become what Christ wants us to be. And as he uses this idea of a body, it's really fascinating. I brought you some statistics today. Here's what I think God was thinking. There's 206 bones in a human body. Big deal, right? But how about this one? In 1 inch of your skin, there's 19 million skin cells. There's 60,000 other cells. There's 1,000 nerve endings in 1 inch of skin. 20 blood vessels in 1 inch of skin. In your entire body, there's 79 organs. All of them doing a different role that creates your body so that it can have a healthy life. And what Jesus is saying through Paul, he's saying this. He's going, and the church is no different. Every single person in here, whether they realize it or not, plays a role. I'm going to show you how. So Paul says, think about this for a second. If the foot says, because I'm not a hand, I don't belong to the body, does that make it any less of the body? And if the ear should say, because I'm not an eye, I do not belong to the body, would that make it any less a part of the body? If the whole body were an eye, where would the sense of hearing? And if the whole body were an ear, where would the sense of smell be? But as it is, God's arranged the members of the body, each one those as he chose. In other words, you are here for a specific cause. Verse 19. If we were all a single member, where would the body be? As it is, there's many parts, all of us are different, yet one body. Verse 21. The eye cannot say to the hand, I have no need of you, nor the head to the feet, I have no need of you. On the contrary, the parts of the body that seem to be weaker are, say that word with me real quick so I know you're awake. Whoa, did you hear that? Let me bring that into layman's terms for you for a second. How many of you sit in here sometimes and said, I don't think it would matter if I left? I don't feel like I bring very much to the table. I feel like in my life I've sinned so much that I don't really have a lot to bring people. I don't want people to know my story because if they knew my story, they would reject me. How many of you maybe thought that? You don't have to raise your hand. Can I tell you what God just said in that verse? That you are indispensable. Let me say that again. This church cannot function without people just like you. We kind of walk into church and we go, oh yeah, that's that guy. He preaches all the time. And oh, there's one of those elders. And you know, I talked to this one guy. He knows the Bible so good. He's such a good church person. They do the whole church thing so well. Okay. Do you know what God thinks when he sees us? He thinks, yeah, but that dude over there who's walked through the worst marriage of his life, and that woman over there who just got crushed in her last one, and that dude who can't get off of that habitual sin, man, I love them so much. They are indispensable to what I'm doing here. You know what I didn't realize up in the upper deck of that big building? That I was indispensable. I thought I was very dispensable. I thought they can get somebody else to do this. I'm miserable. And instead of me opening up and going, you know what? I'm indispensable here. I'm a part of the body. It's my job to get off my butt and go do something in this church and meet people. And instead of going and having like Bible studies on a Friday with a group of guys or having a couple couples over and getting to know them, you know what we did? We sat there with our arms crossed. I just don't get anything out of this. We don't have any friends. Let's just leave. You know what? Sometimes I sit and just wonder what would have been had I just not been so prideful. I think I would have really loved my 2 years or whatever God gave me there, but I was so prideful I couldn't get past it in order to let my heart know somebody else's heart. On the contrary, the parts of the body that seem to be weaker are the indispensable. Verse 23. And on those parts of the body that we think less honorable, we bestow greater honor, and on unpresentable parts are treated with greater modesty. Verse 24, which our most presentable parts do not require, but God has so composed this body, giving greater honor to the part that lacked it, that there may be no division in the body. You know what that means? Here's what that means. That there's somebody in here that feels incredibly indispensable, but God has healed you from your broken marriage. And there's somebody in here that's going to walk through a broken marriage. And because you two are friends, and because they open their heart up and you open their heart up, your heart up, guess what? You guys are going to meet together and he's going to go, man, my wife left me. And you're going to be able to look at him and go, it's happened to me before, man. And you're not just some dude who's experienced loss anymore. You're Jesus to that guy. And that is when life really happens. Man, I'm really struggling with this sin. I can't figure out how to get up. And somebody looks at you and goes, I got out of that. Let's talk about it. You're Jesus. And when that happens, there is no division in the body, but that the members may have the same care for one another. Verse 26. And if one member suffers, everybody suffers. If one member is honored, then all rejoice together. Now, are there imperfect people in churches? Absolutely. You may be sitting in here and you go, oh, I feel like I tried that here. You need to try again. Maybe that crowd of people is not the crowd of people God has chosen for you. Maybe when you have the itch on your leg, that's not the hand of the body that needs to be itching your leg, and you've been going to the wrong spot. There's a crowd of people here for you. When I walked into that church, there was 9,000 people. In this church on a Sunday morning, there's 1,400 people. If you get turned off by the first two, don't be prideful and go, well, you know, it just didn't work out. I'm going to go to a different church. Just find different people. Because God has called you here because you're indispensable. Now, Paul goes on in the book of Hebrews, and here's what he says. Now, when you do this, don't give up meeting together. Now, some of us, we go, I got this down, man. I'm doing the whole meeting thing. I come in every Sunday. I got my little chair. It's my space bubble, you know, because it's my favorite one, and I come to it every week. And then, you know, Daniel sings those 3 songs, and you say a message, and we get in the car, and we talk about it, and then we come back and we do it. We meet every week. That's not meeting. That's sitting your butt in a chair. I sat for 2 years with my butt in a chair in the middle of 9,000 people, and I was, where's Waldo? Couldn't figure out why I didn't like that church. It wasn't the church, it was me. Unconnected. No friends. Nobody to care for me. Of course I'm not going to like it. And all I had to do was just get up and go, hey man, what's your name? Would you guys like to do dinner on Friday night? Hey, look, we're having a Bible study at our house. Would you guys like to come over? Hey man, let's just go grab some coffee. Or how about this one? Hey, we're going to go to the next men's ministry event or the women's ministry event, or we're going to connect in over here. We're going to connect. There's 1,000 things you can do. There's 1,000 things I could have done at Prestonwood. But I didn't do them. And when I left, I blamed it on them. And 10 years later, I blame it on me. Because I had to grow up. And I had to realize that there's more to this church or that church than I noticed, because I was so consumed with myself. I was like, you know what, if the pastor really wanted to know me, he'd talk to me. You know what, there was 9,000 people that went to that church and 600 pastors on staff. I mean, think about that. I was one of 600 employees. How's he gonna have time all the time to talk to me? He's not. It's not realistic. And I had an unrealistic opinion of it. And I was like, well, if he doesn't make time for me, well, what do I think of myself? You know? And so I had to like grow in that. And then on top of that, I was like, you know what? These people should want to know me. I'm a pastor on staff. Good grief. How come we can't make friends? Because I wasn't doing anything to make effort to make friends. It was on me, but I wasn't doing it. I thought I was meeting, but I wasn't meeting. Because meeting looks like this. Together as some are in the habit of doing, but instead encouraging one another. That is what meeting looks like when we sit down and we do life. Let me tell you what encouragements look like in our church. I was talking to a guy last Thursday about some things going on in his life, and he said, you know what? When I first came to North Road, I laid myself out there and I told a couple guys that I had a problem with alcoholism. And they met me where I was. One of them continued to disciple me, and because of that, I'm no longer an alcoholic. But it took him taking his life and going, here's my big, dirty, hairy, ugly. I need connection. Will you help me? And guess what? There were people there. There were parts of the body that connected with him that did what he could not do on his own. And we have a couple in our church that just got to adopt 2 little boys, and they have been praying about it for so long. I mean, so long. And so many of us have wrapped our arms around them and prayed with them and walked with them, and now we're watching that come to fruition. Our children's minister, which is one of my favorite stories, her name is Autumn White, if you haven't got to meet her. Autumn came to our church 9 years ago, living with her husband, struggling in her life with God. And as she came here, people wrapped their arms around them, and she began to change, and he began to change. And they show up in my basement office at the time in the bottom of my house to sit down and go, hey man, we think we're living our life all wrong. We're living together, we have this kid, we have our first child, and you know what, we just realized we're in sin, so we've been living in separate bedrooms. I'm like, oh my goodness, let's fix this, and let's do a get her done wedding, and let's just get you married. You know you want to be. So we did. About 8 months later, they had their wedding reception. their ceremony, and she goes, hey, when you announce us as husband and wife, give me a chance to turn around and address the crowd. And so I did, and she turns around and she goes, hey, I just want you all to know, because a lot of you don't know Jesus, that Jesus has changed my life. And this isn't my wedding day. My wedding day was 6 months ago. This is a ceremony because I wanted you to be a part of it. But I was living in sin, and now I'm not, and Jesus is changing my life, and he could change your life too. And I watched this girl who moved here from Springfield, Missouri, who had no relationship with Christ, come in here with her husband, with her boyfriend at the time, and get their life transformed. And now she's our children's person. How did that happen? Because there were people who were in this body that were Jesus to her. How many of you are new and you really need somebody to be Jesus to you? It's possible. But you have to take your heart and you have to put it out there. Matt Bartig had to come off the third row of the upper deck of the last row of a humongous stadium and go, hey, here I am, big, dirty, hairy, ugly, and all. I need some connection. And I never did it. Don't be me. Be better than me. So when you walk out of this room today, there's going to be tables all the way down. You want to get connected in men's ministry. You want to get connected in women's ministry. You want to get connected with your kids and students. Maybe you're 18 to 28 years old. As soon as the fourth service is over today, we're going to have a luncheon with Qdoba there just for you, because we're starting a massive young adult ministry, and we want you there. You don't even have to sign up. Just come at 1 o'clock. They're having lunch. If you've been coming in the last 5 weeks, and you're new and you want to come and check this thing out on a deeper level, next Sunday at 1 o'clock, we're bringing in Olive Garden and we're going to sit down together. All the staff's going to be there. I would love a chance to sit at your table and just get to meet you. This could be your church. It could be a fantastic experience for your family. You could find connection here you didn't know it was even possible, but it won't be because my sermon was good or Daniel sang really well. It'll be because you found a strategic group of people who meet you in your strategic time of life. And your question has to be, will you let them? Because if you cross your arms and say, nope, I only come here on Sundays to hear you and then I'm gone, you'll start swerving. You'll start swerving, and there'll be nobody there to straighten you out. Let's pray. Father, thank you for your words today. God, I just pray that this convicts some hearts, that it challenges some people, that they would become a part of this church because they lay their heart out there. And they allow you to just get them connected. Father, I pray for them as we sing this song, that they would feel challenged, that they would worship you and they would commit to you that, God, I'm going to lay my heart out there and I'm going to do what it takes. And because of that, God, they would find a church that loves them, that sees them as indispensable. In your name I pray, amen. Can I say one last thing before you play anything? Just real quick. I know we're in the dark. We can all play hide and seek. Here's what I want to tell you. You ready? For some of you, you sat in this room because you've been coming here for 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, and you're like, well, that message I could have stayed home from, because that doesn't really apply. This totally applies to you. You want to know why? Because if somebody would have just got out of their stinking row and came over to me and said, hey man, what's your name? And I wanted to build a relationship with it, it would have just took all the walls down. Sometimes people need help taking the walls down. So those of you that are regulars around here, you have just as an important role in the body. You are just as indispensable. Who sits around you that you've seen in the last couple weeks and you go, you know, they're new. I need to just go introduce myself. Say, hey, what are you doing? You want to grab coffee? And be Jesus. Because, man, if we do that, come on, man, we're going to have to put more than just some chairs in the hallway. God is going to really blow this thing up because people are going to come to know him on a deeper level. Don't we want that? Isn't that why we sit here? So let's be that church. And watch what God does.
Who else can make every king bow?
now you got a decision to make, right? Just like I did every Sunday that I walked out of Peawood. Was I gonna like cross my arms and say, well, somebody will come to me if they want me to be a part of it? Or am I gonna put myself out there? And for those of you that are regulars, man, as you walk out of this place, you see a guest, you help them. Let me say one last thing. I always try to make myself as accessible as possible. So if you're new, you want to grab coffee and I can make it available, I will do it. Right after this service, there's a wood door back on the left-hand side. It's our cry room. I'm going to do a pastor's reception. If you're new, first couple weeks, maybe first 6 weeks, and you never met me and you want to say hi, just come back there. We got some like donuts that'll appease your kids while you're in there talking to me. I'll give you my card. We can exchange numbers, and if you want to grab coffee, we can do that. But please, young adult, 18 to 28, man, after the fourth service today at 1 o'clock, come eat Qdoba and find out about it. If you're a new family, come at 1 o'clock next Sunday, Eastham Olive Garden with us and find out about this place. We would love to get to know you. Why? Because you are indispensable. This is a church that understands your value. And we want you to feel valued while you're here. Have an awesome week. See you next week.